record. That will be your signal, Mr. Chairman.
This
Larry's
conference will now be recorded.
I'm sorry, Don?
You're very pixelated.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? I guess I'm moving too quickly for the camera.
Kind of like it.
Yeah, there you go. I have no idea. But hopefully it'll clear up. I'd like to reopen our Board of Selectmen's meeting for March 8th, 2021. We opened with an executive session at 5:30 to review the status of litigation involving basically all the town actions presently in play. Received a review of that. I had some discussion, and we'll follow up with some questions after the fact as we were time limited. It was, however, a good discussion and cases are moving forward. We then moved on to a pursuant of MGL 30A to discussion if collective bargaining was an issue with the Harwich Employees Association. Again, had a discussion. It's an ongoing item, and we'll follow up in the next several executive sessions. We closed the meeting just about 2 minutes ago, so about 6:44, and then now back in open session. I would ask you to start this open session by joining me in the Pledge of Allegiance. And thank you, Joe. If you will, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all.
Just a couple of words there.
Moving next to weekly briefing. Joe, that and Megan, that goes to your bailiwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I hand it over to our interim public health director, I did just want to take a moment to take note of the significance, obviously, of this week. As we all know full well, we're encroaching upon a full 1 year of COVID-19, and we know that Wednesday, March 10th marks exactly 1 year since Governor Baker declared a state of emergency in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And, you know, that the impact of all of that is no less evident by this discussion this evening, as the board will meet jointly with the Finance Committee, an annual endeavor that usually takes place on a Saturday with some camaraderie, perhaps a little bit of revelry at the very end, but you know, we're not able to do that this year. So, Mr. Chairman, in light of that, I would just respectfully ask if we could take a moment of silence to just recognize what the past year has wrought upon our town, our state, our nation, and our world, and keep in our minds those who have been impacted by the devastating effects of COVID-19 as we approach upon the first anniversary of that dreadful pandemic. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. At this point, I'll turn it over to our interim health director to cheer up the room after I brought it down. But Megan, if you could give us your weekly briefing.
Sure. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Larry. We have more good news again this week. Again, we are still following 2 active cases. They are 2 different active cases than they were a week ago, but nonetheless, we are in the single digits of active cases in Harwich for 2 weeks in a row. We do have a total of 576 cases since the beginning, which is just like Joe said, about a year ago. And our positivity rate is, drum roll please, less than 1%. It's 0.97%. And there is an error in my report where it says 19 weeks where it should say 2. So we've had 945 tests in the last 2 weeks, and 33 of those tests were positive. So our positivity rate is dropping very, very fast, and it's wonderful to see. We do believe it's partly because of vaccinations, and partly because it's too cold to gather with your friends as much as it was over the holidays. In other news, we have an opening of another priority group within phase 2 of the vaccination plan. So starting on Thursday, March 11th, people who are in early education and K through 12, educators, childcare workers, school staff, they become eligible to sign up for a vaccine appointment. That group joins the very big group that is currently still trying to finish up getting vaccinated, the 65 and older group, and the people that have 2 or more comorbidities. So the group is getting larger and larger. We are getting more vaccine week to week, but it still isn't up to the demands of the people that are looking for vaccinations. So having said that, Cape Cod Community College has been tapped as a site for vaccine on Cape Cod, and they're looking to do in the thousands of vaccines every week. So that is a big difference from a week or 2 ago. However, those slots, they still fill up really fast. All appointments are booked on the mass.gov website. You can find slots on the mass.gov/COVID vaccine map website. But if you are over 75 years old, again, we do encourage you to contact the health department or the Council on Aging to get on a list. They are starting to maintain a list of individuals that are still looking for a vaccine and they've been unable to get one. That list is being distributed to Cape Cod Healthcare, who are running that clinic at the college. And just recently, they did contact us to get some names off the list, and people were extremely happy to be able to run up to Barnstable and get a vaccine just today. So that's great. And right now, they're using the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. It was just approved for use, and it's a one and done vaccine, which will also speed up our vaccination process, not having to space them out 2 to 3 weeks apart. We will be able to get more people vaccinated faster. But starting on Thursday, we're going to have a huge influx of people looking to get vaccinated. So if you're still in that group that's currently open, contact the Board of Health, contact the Council on Aging, contact your physician if you haven't already, to find a vaccine, because it's hard to get an appointment on the website. We have a plan in place to vaccinate our homebound. We're working with our EMS and Outer Cape Health, and we have our list together for our homebound population. So that's underway as well as our senior housing facilities, the Pine Oaks Villages. One is being taken care of by the Federal Pharmacy Program. CVS is doing one, and the others are being done by Outer Cape. That's been a good cooperation between the Council on Aging, Health, and EMS and Outer Cape Health. They've been great. And that's the vaccine update for you. We are still encouraging testing for anyone who's symptomatic. We have Outer Cape, as well as the Cape Cod Healthcare Hotline that you can call to get a test. You can also go on to cvs.com and sign up for a test. And right now they're not as hard to find and hard to get, so you can sign up for a test in advance. If you have any symptoms, it's a free test through CVS, and the results are back in a day and a half, 2 days at the most. Happy to take questions if anyone has COVID questions.
I have
Megan?
none tonight, Megan, so.
Larry, this is
Michael?
Michael. I've got one. Megan, I was contacted by somebody in the Little League organization today, and they're anxious to get their players back on the field. Are they able to do that?
Right now, the sports guidance hasn't changed. I believe they're allowed to play with lots of restrictions, masking, social distancing, with lots of restrictions. So they're still able to play. It's up to the organization to meet the guidelines. So if they can meet the guidelines of social distancing and masking, then they're able to play.
And can I get you to forward me those guidelines?
Sure.
So I can send them along? And then
Absolutely.
they did mention last year at this time, or last year when they discussed this with the Little League organization, they said that the town was not in favor of them using the fields. That's not the case now, is it?
That's not the case. That was never the case. No one requested use of the fields last year. So if we receive a request to use the fields, we'll just confirm their COVID protocols are in place and allow play.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Other question for Megan? Joe, I'll turn it back to you then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and right over to the Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce, Cindy Williams, for her updates.
Good evening. I'll stay with the positive after Megan. We've had a lot of hustle and bustle happening around the 7 villages. Businesses that have been closed are starting to work to reopen. So that's been great to see. We're getting ready to do a few socially distant ribbon cuttings with some of the new businesses as they get to reopen or they get to open. We're also working with 2 of our inns who have new owners to get them prepared for the season and what to expect. And so we have a lot of exciting things happening. If anyone did not stop into Dr. Gravity's Kite Shop this weekend, please make sure you do go in and meet the new owners, Rob and Colette, and see all the great things that they've done. Their motto is they're going to take what's been and make it soar. So really excited for them. Great couple, and they've cleaned things up, and you can find all the great kites and socks and all the wonderful things that are there. So a lot of things happening with our businesses down throughout the town, not just down in Harwich Port. We've got some things happening in East Harwich, West Harwich, and Harwich Center as well. So some great things happening.
Thank you, Cindy. Other comments or questions?
Larry?
Looks like we're, as they say in the old days, starting to see the end of the tunnel, huh? The light at the end of the tunnel.
Definitely.
Ed, did you wish to speak?
Yeah, sort of also on the up note of this all, I know, you know, one of the other aspects of the pandemic has been making traveling a lot harder than it ever has been. And in most cases, you know, it's, you know, putting off vacations that you've planned and things like that, which is disappointing. But in other cases, you have travel that is made necessary because a family member is suffering severe medical issues. And I just want to this time say, give kudos to our Congressman Keating's office. There's a local family, the mother and daughter. The mother is up at Mass General with significant health issues, and the daughter is being cared for by friends. The mother and grandmother lives in England and has had significant issues trying to get here to be able to oversee the care of her daughter and take care of the granddaughter. We reached out on late Friday evening to Senator Keating's office, and his staff has been working throughout the weekend to make travel of that woman from England possible. They put in an amazing amount of work to help facilitate that. And I believe by tomorrow evening, she'll be here and giving care to her loved ones. And it was really special to watch and be a part of that effort.
Thank you, Ed. Next on our agenda is the department budget hearings, and I'd like to comment first that Selectman McCaskill is on the road, and so he's on the foot audio, but not on video, and Selectman Ford is unable to attend tonight's meeting. With that, I see we have Chairman Troyo here. I'd ask the Finance Committee if you want to bring the committee to order.
Thank you, Larry. My name is John Chori, Chairman of the Finance Committee in Harwich. I'd like to do a roll call vote to bring the Finance Committee to order. Please signify by saying aye when I call your name. Mary?
Aye.
Angelo?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Dale?
Aye.
Ryan?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
And myself is present. We have 7 of the 8 members present, Larry, for the joint meeting between you and the selectmen.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
We'll start then with the discussion and budget hearings. Joe, I'll start with you to open this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, to you, to the members of the Board of Selectmen, to Chairman John Shorey and the members of the Finance Committee. This begins your annual review of the operating department budgets for fiscal year 2022 in anticipation of our town meeting. Again, the date later in this meeting will perhaps be changed to May 8th, but that means that we are 61 days away as of today from our town meeting. And so as the Board of Selectmen discussed previously with Chairman Chori, what you're being presented with this evening are several of the smaller budgets. You'll be presented with more of the smaller budgets at your meeting next Monday. And in between, both the board and the Finance Committee will meet jointly Friday morning, March 12th at 9 a.m. and Saturday morning, March 13th at 9 a.m. For the remainder of the budgets and the bigger budgets. So, Mr. Chairman, to start out with, I'm prepared to answer questions and or defend the budget of the administration department and the budget for the Board of Selectmen. I know Robin Kelly is here on behalf of the Cemetery Department. Carol Capola, Finance Director, and I are ready to answer questions on behalf of our town clerk who was unable to attend. And we have the various department heads from community development to discuss their budgets as well.
Thank you, Joe. Just a brief comment. We've had these meetings in past years, various ways. In the last several years, we've had an all-day session at Town Hall with all the department heads coming in and apprising the two committees about their needs in the department so we could consider those before the budgets are finalized. This obviously is an unusual year, so we're doing some departments tonight. We'll do more on Friday, another batch, another few on Saturday, and then I think we complete it next Monday. So these are ongoing discussions. And I appreciate, number one, the department heads and people offering to take out their time to come in the evenings and then obviously Friday and Saturday morning. Joe, going back to yours, I think they seem you put together a very complete budget and a lot of details, you and Carol. I do note that the school budgets dropped about 157,000, so that's moving in the right direction. We still have some discussion going forward on the elementary school, and this seems to be separate from that discussion, but that's I note that positive aspect of the last budget we've seen. Any other board members have comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I neglected to just mention what we have in the packet this evening. and what we will have in the packets for the other meetings. But very quickly, just to walk everyone through it, the first document you see there is the sources and uses page that says Town Administrator's proposed budget on it. You were just making some reference to that, Mr. Chairman. Then in the materials, you'll have a one-page sheet that is a recap of the revenues and projections on that. Then there's a deeper dive into broader information on the local receipts. Then you'll see what appears traditionally in our warrant. That is the traditional layout and discussion of the departments as it relates to their salary and wages lines, and then their expense lines. And last, you have more detailed of the departments taken from our Munis, which is the fund accounting software, to give really the quick, the most in-depth yet brief snapshot we can give, because we're unable to rely upon the mega books that Carol has produced. Having said that, Carol's mega book for this year is available. It is on the website, and it has an abundance of information for anybody that's looking for more detail. It is a wonderful compendium and a great resource for anyone looking for more information. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Joe, can I ask 2 questions then to get started? And obviously these questions are you dealing with Carol as well. Your estimate is a significant increase in hotels, meals, and hotel, motel, and meals taxes, which is a good sign that you expect the economy to, as we've said before, and I read this nationally, to pick up and be a much stronger year. So, and I assume, Carol, you're comfortable with that. My second question is, we have a large increase in free cash. Before people get too excited, could you explain that for me?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. I'll start and then have our finance director weigh in and probably correct some things. But first, if I may, with regard to the rooms excise, which as we know is hotel, motel, short-term rental, and meals, that line item you're seeing there. Yes, when you compare year over year, we're looking at a significant increase. But bear in mind that that's a comparison to years that were impacted by COVID. We did see a significant increase in short-term rental. But really, if you look at the comparisons on what we're projecting for revenues, you do have to go back 2 years to really get the full picture, as we were talking previous weeks about golf receipts as well. So what we're looking for is hopefully an expectation of some return. When I say return to normalcy, I don't mean in the way that we live our lives, but in the numbers that we see generated locally. And then with regard to free cash, as you recall, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board and finance committee, during the height of the pandemic, we took extraordinary steps to curtail spending. We instituted an immediate hiring freeze and spending freezes, and those weren't lifted until, if memory serves correctly, right before we had our annual town meeting, which again was not anything normal. That was in September rather than May. And so, that's where you see some of those numbers change and increase. But I'll turn it over for our finance director, probably for some corrections and better explanation.
I certainly don't have any corrections, but I'm happy to take a deeper look into free cash if that's your pleasure. I'm also happy to report that in FY19, the town, this is before the short-term rental came into effect, the hotel, motel, your traditional lodging excise tax was right under $700,000. And that's what we have budgeted for FY22, is the $700,000 figure. We were trying to be somewhat conservative in those numbers. You'll notice in the documents that you have before you that the FY20, the traditional lodging and short-term rentals, which is the first year that came into effect, was just over $900,000 that the town received. So we're still remaining somewhat conservative in our estimations, but we were a little more, I guess, aggressive in FY22 versus FY21. And for free cash that was certified, that free cash that was certified at a much higher number. One of the reasons is because the prior year's free cash typically is appropriated and used in May at your annual town meeting, but you didn't have an annual town meeting. So that increased your free cash as well as the spending freeze and hiring freeze that occurred in essentially the fourth quarter of FY20. So I think that I don't believe that you're going to see those numbers moving forward unless the board takes some measures in which to, if that's your desire, to ensure that those numbers remain as high. I'm thinking that's not your preference, though.
Okay. Thank you for that, Carol. Let me ask the other board members. Don?
No, I think Carol's absolutely right. I mean, just for the public, because we're all geeks here. Free cash isn't free, first of all. It's the leftover from what you didn't spend in the prior year, and since it was more than a year, that's why it's jacked up. And second of all, it's a horrible mistake to take one-time hit money and try to fund anything as continuing operations out of it. So it's tempting to look at this as something that we've built up, but it isn't. I mean, it's a one-time snapshot where we have a bucket of money because of set of peculiar circumstances. It isn't going to repeat itself. To Joe's point, he's projecting, along with Carol, some more robust receipts based on tourism in the summer. But that you and I both know that that's a crapshoot. Could be, could maybe not. Both Carol and he commendably have only been conservative about projecting those types of generated figures. So I mean, take it for what it is. It's a one-time hit that we might be able to do something with. I would rather do something sustainable, like OPEB or stabilization. And so the bottom line here is it's not like the dawn of a new era that we've got a whole bunch of money that we can spend.
Yeah, thank you for that further explanation. Michael?
Yeah, just actually clarification. Joe, are you and Carol meeting with the school on a regular basis?
So, Selectman McCaskill, we have our monthly meetings, what we call the Monomoy Finance Group. We met, if memory serves correctly, 2 weeks ago. And separately from that, Jill Goldsmith and I met with our respective councils to have a deeper dive on the alternative assessment and the issue going on with that. Nothing fairly recently. We do know that the school committee is scheduled to certify their budget number Thursday evening. And so the school budgets will be on your agenda on Monday the 15th for further discussion. So we do have our regular meetings. We met 2 weeks ago, but nothing of substance since then.
And Joe, on the school budgets coming before us Monday, is the school going to present those budgets?
So I haven't confirmed with Dr. Carpenter. What I intended on doing was taking their numbers and, if nothing else, having that available for discussion by the board, because we need to get moving on the process. I can certainly reach out to Dr. Carpenter and Chairperson Games to see if there's flexibility and ability to present on Monday directly. I just wanted to ensure that the board had an opportunity to react to the school committee's action Thursday evening.
So Joe, if I can, and I'll ask the questions now, but I'll send you an email tomorrow when I get back. It's been brought to my attention that the school purchased a $500,000 reading program. So I'd like to confirm that. And then it's also been brought to my attention, or I'd like to understand more about the new canine program at the school. And I would also like to understand the reallocation of the school officers that haven't been going to school. Is there any savings, any turnbacks, anything that's coming back to the town on the not using the school resource officers this year?
Thank you. I've got my notes, but I look forward to it.
Okay, the half
Michael,
million dollar reading
Mike-
program is an interesting one.
Michael, could you copy us all on those questions? Those are good questions.
I will copy you, Larry, and then you can distribute so that we don't break open meeting law.
Okay.
John Giorgio is online.
Well, we're not going to discuss them at all. This is information, but I shall do that.
I'll send them to you, Larry, and then you can distribute how you see fit.
Thank you, Michael. Ed?
Yeah,
Yeah, questions, comments on the budget
no,
administration? Okay. John, I'll turn it to you and the finance committee then to,
Thank you, Larry, and thank you, Joe, for a snapshot there, and Carol also. I have just a couple quick questions, and then I can open up to my board members if they have any questions also. In that, we talked about free cash earlier, and those local receipts, was the free cash, was there a spreadsheet on free cash in there, or are we just referencing a past slide somewhere else? I do have a slide, but I couldn't find it when you were talking about free cash. But is it in that local receipts somehow, or I didn't see it in there?
So Chairman Chori, if you look in the packet, and I'll try and do it this way. So this is the first document. It says Town Administrator's Proposed Budget.
Yeah.
Page 2 of that, you'll see that it's the budget. The title is Budget Fiscal Year 2022 Revenues. And as you progress down from real estate and personal property, local receipts, state aid, and then the first item under other is free cash.
I saw that, Joe, but that's just the amount that you're taking from the bucket of free cash, right? That's not the total amount of free cash available.
So I think I know where the finance director is going to go, but I'll defer to Carol. I know it's not the full certified amount that you would have been noticed on several months ago. Yeah.
That's what I was getting at, yeah.
So the document, the larger document that's on the town's website does list the 10-year history of free cash and the amounts that were certified over those 10 years. It's not presented here in the information you have before you this evening.
Thank you. I thought it was a much larger number, and I do have the sheet that you gave me, but I got a million sheets in front of me. I can't find it. But okay, so thank you, Carol. Because I thought it was do you know what offhand what that big number is, Carol? Just so the folks can have an idea.
That's available for the FY22 town meeting. Yes, I have that. It's $3,915,365.
Okay, that's what I thought it was. Okay, thank you very much on that. Second
Chairman
one,
Corey?
yes,
John, if I could just ask a question of Carol.
sure.
So on the sheet, page 2 of what's been passed out tonight, the free cash that is the first item under other at 833,000. What does that represent?
That represents a full funding for wastewater of $515,000 and change. In addition to that, it funds Monomoy Regional School District's capital assessment to the town. And then I believe it was $45,000 for IT equipment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, John.
Good question, Ed. Good question. Second question is a quick one too. To follow up a little bit on what Selectman McCaskill said on the Monomoy school system. Realizing that we all are, I think, tight schedules personally to vote on a lot of budgets, a lot of warrants. I think it'd be maybe a good idea, since I'm proposing it, that if you do bring in the Monomoy school system, Dr. Carpenter, to present to the selectmen, I might be to bring in the finance committee too at the same time. That way he will only have to present once, and that'll save him from us scheduling a meeting with him coming in, reorganizing our board. I just think it would help move along that particular budget, since it is probably the largest single budget. If we could meet jointly on that. I don't know the mechanics of that, Joe, parliamentary wise and stuff, but if we could make that happen, I think it'd be a great way to help act on these budgets. That's the end of my questions, Larry. I can ask individual members of my committee if they'd like to speak, if you'd like to go forward on that.
Mr. Chairman, if
Joe,
I could just.
respond to yours first, so Joe?
Sure.
Thank you. I will reach out to Dr. Carpenter on Tuesday and let him know where we're at. I just also want to remind everybody that there is a requirement under the regional agreement that the school system provide detailed line item information. And so, traditionally, we've tried to tie their presentation to the availability of that material. Again, I'll reach out to him on Tuesday and see when they think they'll be able to come. I will emphasize that we do have the Selectmen and Finance Committee meeting jointly on the 15th anyway. So I'll know very soon if we can make that effort happen on the 15th. If not, planning beyond that.
Okay, great, Joe, because yes, I'd like to, vote on the budgets as quickly as we can with as much information as we can. Larry, would you like me to open it up to the other members of the board?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll just start off individually with people, and if you have questions, please answer them, and then I'll move on to the next person. Mary, we'll start with you.
As the newbie here, I'm good for the moment.
That's why I asked you first, Mary. Okay, Angelo.
I'm surprised at one of the first numbers on page 1. A number of times during the year, the selectmen had meetings where they discussed either trying to hold the tax levies the same from one year to another, or if that was not the case, to just it'll go up like 2% or so. And the first number I see is a tax levy of 4.3% increase. Now, I don't imagine that's done without raising taxes to the individuals. And I think that that's a difficult thing to do this year and in other years. It can be very hurting in the town meeting. I wonder if where the selectmen are on that, and if they do want to get back to, I'll say 2, or 2.5, whatever that is. As we go through the other items that are going on, we're going to have to remove them somehow. And are the selectmen saying they want to raise the taxes by that amount? Just a question.
I don't have a quick response to that, Angela, except we've been trying to hold it down. I think when Joe comes back to us, he's always talked to us about level funding versus meeting certain contract requirements. But
Larry?
That discussion. Michael?
Larry, if I may, I think this warrants an answer by Joe. This is still Joe. Joe presented the budget to us. When we referred it to the Finance Committee, it was not supporting it, and then we were not voting the final budget. My number, Angelo, is still 2%. So maybe Joe could just explain how we got to where we got so far, because this is not the final budget, in my mind anyway.
Thank you, Michael.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I could respond first, I would have to rely upon the assistance of the finance director to get into the machinations that go into the tax levy limit that you see represented there. Knowing that in Massachusetts, we are capped to the 2.5%, but also knowing that there have been exclusions over the years that may impact upon that. But I do want to be clear that if you progress down that page, just about the center of the page and as a marker, if you will, you can see on line 15, it says town operating budget. And so as I've said numerous times, as Chairman Ballantyne just referenced, the directive of the Board of Selectmen that the finance director and I carried on to the department heads, which they have reached and attained with some specific exceptions that I can go into in the warrant document presentations. But you'll see that the town operating budget increased by a fraction of a percent, 0.6%, And that's because it was the budgets you'll see as you go through the town operation budget, which begins on page 8, and you just take your hand down the right-hand column, you'll see that in most instances of our departmental operating budgets, they are at 0%, if not lower. The instances that I've spoken before about those where they're not is where the action that we would take on that budget would have affected a collective bargaining responsibility and would have caused reductions in force that would have impacted on certain departments. And so I've advised the board and the finance committee, as I presented, that the operating budgets are presented to you that in accordance with the board's directive. It is level funded first, and then in the instances where it cannot be level funded because of fixed or semi-fixed costs, it does not exceed 2%, let alone the annual 2.5%. And so again, the question that's been raised is regarding the tax levy limit as it relates to real estate and personal property. And I'm not skilled right now to get into all of the particulars as to why that number comes in, but it remains a fact and a true statement to say that the operating budgets that you're going over this evening are in most cases level funded, and in all cases except for, I believe, 3, less than 2%.
Excuse me, I see that, but why do we need those extra funds if you're covered and everything's fine? Where's the money being spent? Is it going into a bank account? Well, because there is a difference. And I assume that the property, because of the value of the houses and all, has gone up. And without changing the taxing item, that may be fine. But it's still 4.3%, and that's 4.3%. How do you get it back down to where it's supposed to be, is the question.
Larry?
Ed?
Yeah, and this is, I guess, somewhat of a question for Carol. The real estate and personal property taxes percent change of 4.4%, as I understand it, are basically made up, that increase would be made up of 3 things. One, the whatever portion of the allowable 2.5% levy increase that we took. 2, whatever new growth we have, which could come in at 1% or 1.5% or whatever. And then also, what also impacts that percent increase is any new or additional revenue being raised from the levy to pay for bond indebtedness. And I'm assuming that's how we wind up getting to the 4.4% change.
Carol?
That is exactly correct. So we start with a base levy limit, which is the same as it was for FY21. There's a 2.5% growth factor. There's a 2.5% levy increase. There's a growth factor that we're using. We're making an assumption of using $400,000 as for new growth. There are a number of excluded debt items between the town, Monomoy Regional School District, Cape Cod Regional Technical High School, and then the Cape Cod Commission is the assessment that the town receives on an annual basis is also added into that to come to your total of the $55.6 million. That's exactly how the calculation works and is designed to work. So we we start with that basis, and any changes, of course, that the Board of Selectmen would like to see to those, we certainly can make adjustments as necessary or as directed.
I guess to everyone's point, that's been our discussion overall is that is the assumption that we move to 2.5%, is that a good assumption, or should we be looking at less? And that's a discussion I think that we as a board have to have. Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to go back to an earlier statement that was made, though. Wherever we derive with the numbers, the statement that what I'm presenting is that we're okay and everything's fine. I don't want those statements attributed to me because I haven't made those statements. And in fact, you know, what I want to be clear is that this was not an easy budget process, and it is not an insignificant feat for the department heads to come in as they have, where their budgets are at 0 or less than 0. That has not been the case in recent history, and it does comport with the board's directive. And that we are still battling with the dichotomy of our budget is our statement of our priorities while trying to remain in a livable town for the taxpayers. And so what you have presented meets the directives of the Board of Selectmen as presented by their budget message and represents significant decreases in the operating budgets of the departments.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe.
I think this
Larry,
conversation, oh, I'm sorry.
Larry, if I may, I understand Angelo's question, and I'm not sure that, I think now we understand how we got to the 4.3%, but I'm not sure that 2.5% really was our goal when we created our budget message. Our budget message was no more than 2%. And I think that you're right, and this is nothing to the town administrator at all. I think the board didn't specifically say based on taxes or the tax levy limit as well, because 2% was our number. Level, to me, as we went into the conversations, and I know we had an after conversation about contractual agreements, but 2% was my number. And I'll reiterate what I said before. This is a great proposed budget. This is not the final budget, and there's still time to tweak some things. And for me, Joe did exactly what we asked him to do on the department budgets. And Joe, the only thing you left out was you said that budgets that were not at 0% and that went up to the 2%, that it would have affected employment, and it would have affected employees, and we would have had to make cuts. It also would affect town services. And that was something that we took from you, that town voted these services, and we're not ready for us to take them away yet. So part of those budget increases in those departments were so that we weren't affecting town services. And I'll point out again, and I hate to continuously point out the school budget is almost equal to our budget, or over our budget overall. The school needs to play on the same field that we're playing on, and that's why I asked those questions earlier. And I hope that we ask some critical questions. And the elementary school is one component of that. And that 505,000 minus what you said tonight, Joe, is still 330,000 too high. So I hope that we continue to drive that home, that our departments and the town side is feeling some pain on the way we've created our budget. And they need to as well.
Larry?
Thank you, Michael.
Don?
Don?
Yeah, I want to underscore what Michael said. For the benefit of everybody on the FinCom especially, is that all of these constructs that are external to us, like regional agreements and everything, Angela, you would know this. They're top line bills. They have to be paid before we can ever get into the town's budget. So the nut of the problem here is that we haven't solved the dilemma that we were in with the school, because we only get to spend what's left over after what's assessed.
Don, I know you're fully knowledgeable about this. I remember once at a time when you went into a town meeting and there was supposed to be an increase in the budget and the people were not very happy and it caused all sorts of problems. That's what my concern is. I think we just have to
Override
go.
involved in this, Angelo.
What? Pardon?
There is no override involved with this.
Well, I know that, but what I'm saying is there are some issues. So I'm just suggesting that as we proceed, we see if we can find money here and there to reduce that sum of dollars by not needing it to do something. Do you think everything that we have listed in all areas, the Warren areas and whatnot, have to be done? Or it's something that we'd like to do?
I'll repeat what Michael and Joe.
Can I be quiet? It's up to you.
I'll repeat what Michael and Joe said. It's not the final budget right now, and that we are at or below zero on a lot of services. There comes a point where you can't make up for a bill that you receive from the tech school or from the school district without it impinging on the rest of the town. And that's where we're at right now.
The discussions continue on this, Angelo.
Okay.
John?
Thank you, Larry. Dan, do you have any questions of the budget, Dan?
I'm good, John. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dale?
Yeah, thank you, John. And thank you to Carol and Joe and your teams for pulling all this information together. There's a lot to absorb here. Typically what I do is I go through these statements as I look in the right-hand column for the percentage change and look for something that jumps out at me and then try to understand, why it might be that way. And as I'm looking at the local receipts, I think it's page 2. I'm looking at the local receipts and I'm wondering if you can help me understand the thinking behind the increase of proposed receipts from golf operations and beach recreation and youth for fiscal year 22.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, if I may, to start with that one, and just going in order as you see them on the list there. When it comes to beach recreation and youth, this is again one of those areas that if you look not necessarily year over year, but year over prior year, while it's an increase from the past year, and I think in both instances, it's actually a reduction in the last full normal year we had. And so what we're expecting there is, yes, it's an increase from last year, but it's a conservative estimate based on previous years. We remain cautiously optimistic. And if you remember, caution and optimism were the two messages I conveyed to the selectmen when I presented the budget exactly a month ago today, that we are hopeful that we'll see the level of activity that we saw in recreation, certainly in beach activities last year. And the same is true for the golf operations. When you look at the golf operations, that 1.8 million is really comports to where they were 2 years ago. This was a late change to the revenue estimates, but after the full discussion with the golf operations where Roman and Sean see their operations going, this is one of the budget savers from last year, and there's no indication that golf is going to let up. In fact, everything you hear and read about the industry is it's a perfect activity to do when you have a pandemic because you can spread out, you can be outdoors. And so what we've estimated is an increase in local resident golf fees, local increase in the memberships that were purchased year over year. The resultant changes or increases in golf carts and things of that nature. So although it's a year over year increase, it is still relatively conservative to past years. And I do think we feel comfortable as much as you can when you roll the dice, but these are both cautious and optimistic.
Thank you, Joe. But, as I look at the 1.8 million as compared to fiscal year 2020, it's actually a pretty significant increase over 2020. And last year, as a member of Cranberry Valley, I had a tough time getting a tee time. It seemed like it was over capacity. I kept finding myself on a wait list. So I'm just wondering how we can add, almost $200,000 to the revenues when we seem to be operating at capacity.
So go ahead, Carol.
So you'll notice that that I started with our estimated receipts, and I had mirrored pretty much FY21's when we began this process, and then had numerous conversations with the golf director with regard to the increase in rates that that have been established for the upcoming season, in addition to conversations and numerous conversations about where revenues, where they were estimating revenues to come in for FY22. And this was as of even a couple of weeks ago, where we had an in-depth conversation. They truly believe that the $1.8 million is too low. But I was unwilling to agree to go to $1.9 million or even higher than that. So this was certainly a compromise on our part. But I do believe that the department is going to come in strong on revenues for FY22. They've already sold memberships of 390 memberships as of Saturday. And that is a significant, more than a double increase over the prior year. So I do believe that the department's going to come in strong. They've made some necessary improvements to how tea times are being booked. And I think that we honestly can trust these numbers.
Okay. All right. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out as a member, but thank you.
Yeah, that it?
John, back to you.
That's it, John. Thank you.
Okay, Brian?
I have no questions, John. Thank you.
Okay, Mark?
No questions.
Okay, that concludes the board members, Larry, questions. Thank you very much. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Carol.
Okay, we'll move on, Joe, then to the next item, which I believe is the pull it up here. There's a cemetery department.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have Robin Kelly, our cemetery director, and presenting and ready to answer any questions that you may have on cemetery budget for fiscal year 22 as proposed.
So the salary and wages remain the same from last year. I do have a correction. I actually put in the actuals for dues, subscription, and travel, and I put in a line item of 188.6, and it should be 1,276 because last year we started taking my travel out of the revolving account, so I want to reduce that amount. So if you could reduce that line item, so then my total budget would be 76,542.20. So it's a difference of $610. So if you look at one of the dues, subscriptions, and travel on your report, it went up by 47.81%. If you take out the $610, it'll be the exact same as the year before.
Okay, thank you, Robin.
So the total increase from my budget from last year to this year would be $32.82, which would be for the water utilities.
Is that as exact as you can get it?
That's as exact as I can get. Does anyone have any questions?
Questions for Robin? I'll start with you, Ed.
No, I'm fine.
Michael?
No, I just say great job, Robin. And I know that there's been some requests that you haven't been granted for the last couple of years, and And I certainly recognize what you want, and you're not getting exactly what you want, but I appreciate you being a team player and helping us get over this hurdle. I will bring up the one thing that I know Joe mentioned in our budget presentation about cemetery was that there's been this looming half-time positions so that you could take a vacation. And I'll reiterate my comments that when you were working in the DPW, and I still view your department as part of the DPW since they do most of the maintenance for the cemeteries, most or all, that I do view you as back in that building where they have an administrative staff that could answer the phone when you're away. So as much as I know you want the halftime position and Joe chose not to put it in this budget, I hope that as we move forward, we could have those conversations again, Joe, because I'm not sure that it makes sense to continue to grow the cemetery department when I believe that we have enough staff to handle what Robin has asked for. That's all. But thank you, Robin.
Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just in response, thank you, Selectman McCaskill. Recognizing that Robin is one of a handful of single-person departments, Megan and I are working with all of those department heads to ensure that as they take time off that they've earned, or if they're sick and need to recuperate, that we stand ready to support them. So in the short term, none of our single-person departments have to have that as a consideration. And then building off of what you said, I would, for one, welcome that discussion on a go-forward basis because I think there's opportunities to reorganize where we can achieve the same results without necessarily doing ads to staff. So thank you for that.
Okay. Don?
Just going to echo what Michael and Joe said. We need to have a creative solution. We don't need to add more staff.
Yeah. Agreed. John Troy, I'll turn it to your committee.
Great. Thank you, Larry. I have no questions, but I do concur with what was spoken on that Michael and Don mentioned about the staff issue there. I concur with how they'd like to handle that. I'll open it up to Mary. Any questions?
I'm all set. Thanks, John.
Angelo?
No questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dan?
No questions, thank you.
Al?
No questions. Nice job, Robin.
Brian?
No questions, thank you.
Okay. Mark?
No questions.
My question from the board, Larry, and I just want to congratulate Robin on her awarding of the Arboretum certificate on the nationwide basis that's been covered in past selectmen's meetings. But congratulations on that, Robin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Robin. Moving next to the town clerk's office.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, our town clerk, as I indicated, has unavoidable schedule conflicts, is not able to present. The finance director and I stand ready to answer any questions. I will say that if you look to the expenses line item, while it is true that there is some savings there because of the election schedules, we're further aided by the new hires of staff and their savings in salaries and wages as well.
Questions? Any of Board of Selectmen? Seeing none, Joe, I'll ask you in your finance committee.
Joe, I have no questions of Joe for the town clerk. I'll go down the list again. Mary?
I'm all set.
Angelo?
No questions.
Dan? Yeah?
Dan, oh, I thought you said Dale, I'm sorry. I have no questions, thank you.
Dale?
No questions.
Brian?
No questions.
Mark?
I'm all set.
Okay. Thank you, Larry. That's no questions from the board.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is the Community Development Building, which includes Conservation, Health, and Planning. So Joe, I'll ask you to start this, and I'm sure you have support. I see Amy. Hi, Amy. And Megan, of course, here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we have Ray Chesley, our building commissioner, on behalf of the building department. We have Amy Usowski on behalf of conservation, and our interim health director, and I can speak to the health budget, and I will be answering any questions regarding planning. However, if I may take this opportunity to say, the one question I don't look forward to answer is that we have advertised for a planner. So that is now underway and in the works, and hope to have that search completed very quickly. We do have a planner on the horizon. With that, we're here for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
I'll open up to the board as I'll call Ed.
I'm fine.
Michael?
I'm fine. I'm glad we've advertised for a plan. I think the planning board will appreciate that.
Don?
No questions at this time.
I have no questions. I appreciate Ray. Didn't acknowledge you before Megan's here, but thanks for your contributions. And obviously we've been able, Joel, with your team there to take the tough moves down. So we've all expressed our appreciation. I'll do so again. John, I'll turn it to you, FinCom.
Oh, great. Thank you, Larry. I have no direct questions other than commending, like I think you just said, commending these particular boards with this COVID crisis, and the public not being able to go into town hall to conduct their business. And a lot of these departments are people business. So it must be a very difficult time to work with the public when you can't meet the public. So thank you all for doing that in this time and your continuing efforts to make it happen for the public. I'll run down through the list. Mary?
No questions.
Angelo?
No questions.
Dan?
No questions.
Dale?
No questions.
Brian?
No questions.
Mark?
No questions.
That concludes the board, Larry. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And last
Larry?
on this,
Larry?
yes, Michael?
Michael, can we circle back really quickly to administration? Unfortunately, where I was, I didn't have note capability taking on my computer, so I'm looking through my napkins. I'd like to ask the town administrator on the administration expense line. You've gone from 75,450 and 2 years pretty consistent, then to 85, then to 97, and then to 120,000 this year with a 23% increase. What is going on with our expenses in administration that warrants that increase? Where's that money going?
So I draw your attention first to the program and technology, which is other programs and technical services. And so the ask there, as we've talked about procurement and as we're erasing a large part of the backlog, what you'll see there is that there were many instances where the program or the item that was seeking to be procured was sufficient funding for the acquisition of the materials or the product or the service, but not for all of the related expenses. And specifically, I'm thinking whenever we needed to rely upon, say, electrical engineering when we talk about lighting, or any of the administrative costs relating to the RFP and the IFP. And so as we're trying to work through the process with the department heads and the committee chairs, it occurred to me that we need to have money set aside whereby the project or the procurement is not stymied because they didn't account for the costs related to the procurement itself. So if there's some design work that needs to be done to further develop the scope of services or the product description, if there are costs related to conducting the RFP, whether that's legal, advertising, or otherwise, it's meant to be a stopgap measure. And the hope is future fiscal years, fiscal year 23 and beyond, what we're seeing for the procurements that result from capital and or community preservation fully encompass all of the costs related to the procurement. And so the best example I can give is as we deal with the procurements on the Brooks Park lighting and the White House field lighting, there were significant dollar amounts in the hundreds of thousands that town meeting appropriated either through capital and or community preservation, but it wasn't sufficient to actually do the procurement itself. And so this is meant to be a stopgap measure. The regarding the dues, subscription, travel, and others, that's to make sure we can have as many more people go through procurement training. And it's also my contractual benefit of my membership in the ICMA.
Thank you, Joe. So we can expect that that'll level out at some point.
Absolutely, and certainly on the other programs and technical services. Like I said, I want to have truth in advertising, and I've talked many times, including last Thursday, to Finance Committee, how Megan and I will be meeting with department heads, committee chairs, and all of that after the conclusion of this town meeting to take up the discussion on how we build our capital and community preservation requests to make sure we're accurately covering all costs related to procurement. So I'm hoping that that line item goes down because it becomes a routine and a discipline that's added into those project requests going forward.
Thank you.
Before we leave this, I would ask, since they've taken the time out of their personal schedule to join us tonight, for each of the department heads here to weigh in. Amy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Conservation Department in general prides itself on operating extremely leanly as possible and doing a lot with a very little. So we were able to reduce our budget and have a negative actually proposed. That being said, in the future coming years, you know, a lot of the services that we had to cut because of COVID, we would like to be able to bring some of those services back, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. Megan, speaking as your interim health director.
So the health budget that you have in your packets is actually quite a bit lower than it would have been a month ago due to salary and wages that have changed. So the health budget is a few percentages lower. I want to say 4% less. I don't have it in front of me than last year's budget. So it's gone down. We have adjusted our expenses, or I should say the health department has adjusted their expenses because of virtual meetings that I believe will stay in place. Our dues, subscription, and travel expense line has been cut quite a bit because of that. So we were able to save money there. But overall, our budget has decreased because of personnel changes and reductions in salaries and wages.
Thank you, Megan. Ray?
Yes, good evening. Well, we're still experiencing a large volume of building permits, and so we see revenues coming in to reflect that. Building activity and real estate activity is very high. We were understaffed for a long period of time. We're now fully staffed, and so we're expecting a very good year in 2022 as far as the building department is concerned. We're currently for 21 below budget and above revenue forecast right now.
Thank you, Ray. Joe, I'll turn it back to you to discuss the remaining schedule.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you to the Board of Selectmen and through Chairman Shorey to the Finance Committee. So in your packet, what you'll see is the proposed remaining schedule. We had a department head last week. Megan Eldridge, our Assistant Town Administrator, spearheaded the effort of scheduling and coordinating. And so what we have now for Friday, again, it'll be 9 a.m. By GoToMeeting. You will have representatives from Recreation, Council on Aging, Public Works, Community Center, Youth Services, and the Fire Department. Saturday morning, 9 a.m. via GoToMeeting. We will have golf, harbor, natural resources, Channel 18, water department, and police department. And then rounding out of the smaller budgets, next Monday evening, you'll see finance, which is assessing, accounting, and tax collection, information technology, library, and engineering to close out the discussions. And again, this list is indicative of the departments that you've had in years past for your conversations. So we're hoping that this schedule is agreeable to both the board and the finance committee. And if so, we will commence postings for these for Friday and Saturday for tomorrow.
Thank you, Joe. From the board, I don't think we need a vote, but is everyone, do we have consensus that the schedule's okay?
I'm good.
I hear no objection. John, I'll ask you the same question from your committee.
I thank you, Larry, and thank you, Joe, for putting the schedule together. It's a great schedule. I had sent a note out to my board on Sunday, telling them, you know, that what about tonight to be, who was coming tonight and what was going to be covered in tonight. And I had mentioned that I had tentatively set these dates of the 11th and the 12th. Excuse me, the 12th and 13th. I didn't know about the 15th, but I didn't have any times and dates for that yet. And but we do have them now. So all I can do is ask each individual member how they feel on these dates and stuff. Because Joe, this is a quick question for you, parliamentary question. I guess do we have to have a quorum present to attend, or how does the quorum affect the presentations?
Well, generally speaking, the quorum would affect the presentation in that if there was any action that the finance committee wanted to take relative to a budget being presented, you wouldn't be able to. I'll defer to the chairman of the Board of Selectmen and the selectmen as to their thoughts if the finance committee is not able to participate. But I do want to correct the record that when I went before your body last week, I did announce that date as the dates and times were certified with the board when they had discussions with you.
Joe, why don't you get a reading from your from the committee on whether these dates seem to work?
I may want to ask you, I defer to Selectman McManus. I think he's looking to be recognized.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're bottom of my screen, Ed.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, given in as much as these presentations are meant to be more informational than material that we take action on, I believe we're recording all of these, and they will play can be brought up on Channel 18 to be played at somebody's leisure if they can't make one of the meetings. I think given that we've had the department heads set their schedules to be available, we should move ahead with them.
Yep. Thank you, Ed. John, you have further action?
Sure. What I can do, Larry, is just do a kind of an informal poll right now, and the members can get back to me tomorrow with a more definite yes or no. Because not only do we have these three department head meetings, we as a finance committee have a meeting on the 11th, and then we also have a meeting on the 16th as a statutory public hearing on the operating budget. So why don't I go with Mary first?
Yeah, I'm good with all those dates. I had seen them in something either you or Joe put out a bit ago. Just a question, 9 to 1, 9 to 2, do you have a proposed time frame?
We're hoping to have the sessions on Friday and Saturday go from 9 to noon. And what we were replicating is total time on task in past years was about 6 hours for all the budgets. So we're hopeful that 9 to noon for both days should be more than sufficient.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Angelo?
I think it'll work.
Martin, you think you can make them?
I think so.
Great, thank you, Angelo. Dan?
Yes, I'm good on those dates.
Perfect. Dale?
Yeah, I think I can make these dates.
Great, thank you, Dale. Brian?
So I'll be available on the meeting on the 11th, but as I mentioned to you previously, John, I work on the 12th and the 13th. It would be a conflict for me. I believe I'd be able to make a meeting on the 15th.
On the 15th, okay. So just the 12th and 13th. Okay, thank you, Brian. Looks like we have a quorum anyway. And Mark?
Barring emergencies, that should be fine.
Okay, great, thank you. So it looks like we'll have a quorum, myself there. So it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'll touch base with Tom Sherry to see his availability. But it looks good to us, Joe. Thank you very much for putting this together. I know it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of work for our members here to go literally, 5 days in a row, starting on Thursday, guys and ladies. So I appreciate your help for this. Thank you all. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you, John. Who's
Michael,
Michael?
may I just make a comment?
Sure.
John, if for your board members that might not be able to make 1 or 2 meetings, if you could reach out to them, if they have important questions, they can be read through you as the chair.
Good idea, Michael. Thank you very much. I didn't realize that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
John, I'll give you this opportunity to close your meeting.
Okay. I'd like to close the meeting of the Finance Committee on the operational budget by department heads. Do a roll call vote to close the meeting, or do I have to make a motion, or have?
No, you're fine. Just ask for a roll call would be great.
Okay, I'll do a roll call vote. Mary?
Aye.
Angelo?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Dale?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
And Mark?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. That's 7-0. Meeting's closed on our end, Larry.
Thank you very much, and thanks for your participation. We'll see you in a few days. Next on the agenda is consent agenda.
Mr. Chair?
Michael, excuse me.
Yep, I'm ready. I move that we approve the town administrator's recommendation to grant permission to Verizon New England and N-Star Electric Company, DBA Eversource, to install one JO pole, 186-32 3/4 on the southerly side of Long Pond Drive at the northeast intersection with Yankee Clipper Way, and to maintain poles and their respective wires and cables to be placed thereon, together with anchors, guys, and other such sustaining and protecting fixtures as said companies may deem necessary, and as indicated upon in the plan marked VZ N.E.Inc.NOMA 2020-59.
Second.
So second, any discussion? I'll take a roll call. Don?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Thank you. Next is new business, and Joel, first on is the draft warrant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you to the members of the board. So what you have in your packet is the latest, but by no means final draft of the fiscal year 2020, the 2021 annual town meeting warrant coming up. And as you'll see in the next item, potentially on May 8th. What I'd like to do this evening, Mr. Chairman, is just quickly go through the index document that I provided ahead of the warrant and just identify some articles that the board may wish to be aware of beyond some of the more traditional ones. Mr. Chairman, I know you're aware of some of these, so these correspond to requests that these were the carryover from the last fiscal year, the last town meeting, where we did shed a number of articles given the uncertainty of the meeting and how it would go on. So what you'll see on the first page of the index, certainly by every measure, are some standard returning items. You can see that there are 9 articles that relate to capital outlay. I do believe I omitted 1 or 2, so I'll be adding those. You can see that the various articles related to community preservation. There are at least 13 of those items. And then as we get into that second page, and as you look at Articles 32 and beyond, very quickly, Article 32, at your direction, Mr. Chairman, is a potential article for the board to consider, changing the name of Board of Selectmen to Select Board. That would affect an amendment to the charter and result in changes within the charter to make the reference to our executive board as gender neutral. There is a proposed amendment by me as administrator for your consideration on behalf of the capital outlay plan to correct some of the errors that were perpetuated in 2019. And you can see that there are the planning articles, a few pending articles that are being reviewed by council and others regarding conservation. And then, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, if you look at the third and final page of the index, an article proposing to amend the town seal. So that is an item that members of the board had asked about that will have future discussion. And then some more traditional articles that you've seen before. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, what I'd like to do at the board's discretion is when I reconstitute the draft that you'll see next week, also plan on pulling out several articles that the board can debate the merits on, and then make determinations, if you're so willing, on the inclusion into the warrant. Of course, I'm thinking of two of those that relate to the name of the executive branch, now known as Board of Selectmen, as well as the question relative to the town seal, but certainly willing to have any items of particular note identified separately on the agenda for next week for the board.
Thank you, Joe. I did ask that I'd like to have further discussion on changing the name from Board of Selectmen to Select Board. It seems to be the times we're in, and we're probably one of the few towns that hasn't made that move yet. So I think that's worthy of serious consideration. And we'd like to have, as Joe said, pull that out and we could debate it in more detail. The other one I asked to put on, because it's become a sensitive, is the, you read in the document, is slight revision to the town seal, to consider that. If you look what Mashpee did, they did it very slowly. What they voted on was not to take an action, but to ask I guess, defer to a committee to look at what the possibilities are and what the process is. But I think before we even take that, there's a lot of historical significance in, Cahoon put that together. It's not appropriate, I'm told from folks, that the TP that we have is not appropriate for this area of the country, and that can be offensive to some. But it's a long process. But I felt it was, we needed discussion on that. We certainly need to bring back just the idea that if we want to explore it, to take that to town meeting before we do anything. So those are the two that I had asked Joe to put on for further consideration. And there's better explanation that Joe's written up. I don't have it in front of me, but in the article itself.
Larry?
Ed?
Just a couple of comments. Articles 1, 2, and 3 are customary articles. I'm not sure they're actually boilerplate, because we have had at different times in Article 2, various committees stand up and give reports on their committees. So we actually don't know what typically happens there.
So noted, I can correct that to customary.
And the other one was Article 50. I know the local cultural council would be thrilled, but I think there's a typo in the amount.
Yeah, there is. You're absolutely right. There's an extra zero. Thank you for that I believe it's correct in the draft article, but I will certainly endeavor to make that is correct. Thank you. Sorry about that.
And those are just the things that occur on a cursory scanning.
Okay. Others? Don?
Not going to prolong the meeting. There's going to be plenty of more discussion and Stephen's not here, so.
Yeah, okay. Good. Michael?
I have a 5-hour drive and I'm still going to prolong the meeting. I am, Larry, I'm going to reiterate my concern that we are going to go into a town meeting with less people than normal. COVID-19 is still real. People are reluctant to gather in crowds. We have a proposed date tonight of May 8th and May 15th, I believe, that we'll vote on later. And I see no reason at all or any urgency to add things to a warrant to prolong a meeting with less capacity than we're supposed to have or should have. And I think it's a complete disservice to the taxpayers of the town of Harwich that are uncomfortable going to town meeting to put key items and actually I don't believe that a key item would be select board, but I'll get into that. But changing the town seal. Creating debate like that on a year like this would be irresponsible of the board. Changing zoning regulations. We did it last year and there's quite a backlash at a recent meeting of people that really didn't understand what that zoning change was. And I believe that backlash is going to follow through because two of these particular zoning changes relate to that same project. So why are we trying to fill a book to get a better deal on pages? Or should we bring only the important things before the customary things and the budget before a limited group of people, 200 out of 10,400? I've also asked that we take zoning changes, Larry, and add them to the ballot, and we still need to get a legal opinion on that. So if I may, and looking at select board versus select men, no slight on women at all in that. And if you actually look at how selectmen came up, it was never to exclude women. It's been noted that we need a change, but it's also been noted that based on our charter, several things have to happen for it to change. It's also been noted that there's a cost associated with it. And all you really have to do is go back to Finance Committee's recommendation last year. And we again, to Ed's point last year, haven't talked about this all year long. But there's a financial cost to changing the name. The state doesn't recognize select board. So whatever we vote, we have to change on our paperwork before we send it back to the state. But there was a whole laundry list of things that needed to be explored before we changed the name. So why would we bring another controversial thing without all the facts before town meeting? And Joe, I'm hoping that you're making notes because the way the agenda item read, it to me made sense for us to discuss some of these tonight. Article 17, $50,000 on a roof for a building that later on in the warrant on Article 42, we're gonna vote to sell? Would we really vote $50,000 to fix a roof and then sell the building? That makes absolutely no sense to me. The Bank Street, the ask on funds for Bank Street to make handicap walking trails, which is a great idea. And wheelchair accessible walking trails. We're still talking about, we haven't taken selling Bank Street off the agenda. We haven't talked about it yet. If we sell Bank Street, as town meeting said we could, why would we spend this money on creating trails when they'll have nowhere to park the handicap van? So shouldn't we figure out what we're actually gonna do with Bank Street before we give money on widening walking trails and making handicap walking trails? I could go on and on. I probably won't, but zoning articles, bylaw 38 demo delay bylaw. I believe we actually already have a demo delay. Conservation, bringing back the article that we all voted down last year because of lack of public participation, lack of conversation in board meetings, changing it from 50 feet to 60-foot buffer. We never had that conversation again. Are we going to cram all these conversations into the next 60 days and then bring them before a limited town meeting? We as a board should be bringing the absolute minimum to the 200 or 250 people that might show up at this town meeting. And then we should educate from this town meeting on and put these important things that we talked about last year and then dropped until tonight on the following year's town meeting. We're not going to have a lot of people. People are afraid to be in large groups, and we are bringing important things before a town meeting, and it's irresponsible. I'll save the rest of the comments and the rest of the 14 articles that I could criticize to the next warrant conversation. But the rest of the board really needs to consider the fact that it's a limited town meeting, and we know that. It's an outdoor town meeting. The weather could be bad, which could limit it even more. And we're bringing important decisions before a limited group of people, and that's not fair for everybody. And to Don's point and Ed's point in past meetings, very, very near future past meetings, we haven't brought these topics up since last year's town meeting. We have 60 days now to finish the budget and the warrant, and we're going to jam all these important conversations in there. It's not responsible, Larry, and we should not be bringing these forward.
When I first brought up the two items I mentioned tonight, we didn't know we were going to be moving into an outdoor meeting. And I agree, we don't add more than we need to, but the name of the changing board of selectmen to select board, a lot of towns have done it with not much effort, so I'm not sure what all that entails. I do, as we move forward, I have no objection about moving that back, but at some point, I do think we need these discussions.
Larry, I agree 100%. But again, the Finance Committee's motion last year was very specific and why they didn't support it. And they didn't support it because of a name change. You could call us anything you want to call us. There's state implications to it. There's charter implications to it. It's not just, and I can see tonight that we've covered the charter verbiage, but that's not the whole picture. And again, we've had no conversation about this. And then 60 days prior to town meeting, when we still have a debatable budget and no real chance to educate the public on where we stand with this, other than a vote, we're going to put them on a town meeting warrant and bring them to a limited town meeting. Why don't we do what we say we're going to do after town meeting and really work on these things instead of just waiting till 60 days and throwing them on the warrant? It makes no sense.
You've made your point, Michael. The seal item, that was actually just discussion to start the discussion. Is the way it's been done in other towns, but so not trying to cram anything down. It was to open the discussion up. But but there we are. Other comments or questions? We obviously have no discussion. Oh, John?
Larry, I just have a quick question. I'd like to, if I may, direct it to Joe, please. Joe, could you send me a PDF of the draft overview and then the draft warrants themselves, so that I can get them to my members, so we can start looking at them and start debating them ourselves too? Because to amplify what Selectman McCaskill says, we don't have, like I said earlier in the meeting, we don't have a lot of time here, and so I need those warrant articles. They were supposed to have been transmitted last Friday. So if you could do that, Joe, I'd appreciate it.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Other comments? Joe, when this will come back then again next week?
Well, correct. I imagine that the warrant's going to be an ongoing effort as it was in years past until it's closed and signed by the end of the month.
the schedule will be then, help me out, Joe, at when will we start taking action, whether we support or not some of the items? Because we have,
I would encourage the board to start doing that starting on the 15th,
okay.
next Monday.
Do we have any petition articles that you have that looks like that are coming aboard?
No, nothing beyond the customary.
Okay. Other
Larry?
questions or comment? Yes.
And the two customary petition articles on promoting the town of Harwich and the support for the private libraries, neither of those came in by petition and are being inserted by the town administrator.
So that's correct, as well as local council. And what I've asked is, I'm asking, as you'll see during your presentation or my presentation of these, that I'd like to present these as town administrator in support of the town in partnership with those groups. One of the groups did try to get their petition in just as a safety measure, but it came in too late. So I will be explaining when this comes before the board formally, why I'm asking these to be partnership between the town administrator and those particular groups. But beyond that, there were no petitioned articles that were received.
Larry?
Yes.
And if I do remember back when I first was elected to the Board of Selectmen for a number of years back then, these articles were routinely submitted, inserted by the selectmen until such time as a couple of selectmen opposed, especially the funding article for the private libraries, at which time they started submitting those articles by petition, just to ensure that they got their say in front of town meeting. But that routinely was a customary article of the selectmen.
Okay, so we're back to
Larry.
that then.
Larry,
Yes,
Which
Larry,
is a good,
Michael?
Larry, through you to Ed. Ed, I think that that's what we should go back to. And
Yes.
probably by a vote of the board because of the way it's being done this year, because there's no question of the value that the Chamber of Commerce brings to the town of Harwich, especially under the leadership of Cindy Williams and how many hours she works. But there's absolutely no question that we should support that. And I don't know anyone that would vote against the libraries. So I think that those two articles should go back to not being petition articles, and they should be articles that we bring before the town and support.
I agree.
Joe, I think that ends the discussion and we'll continue next week then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As you alluded to earlier, the next item, if we do want to delay our town meeting, the motion that I've provided in the article was provided by council. And as you know, the board has the right under Mass General Laws, Chapter 39, Section 9, to delay a town meeting, but you cannot delay it beyond June 30th. And so working with the moderator and the clerk, and then confirming the availability of the field, I came up with the 2 dates in question. As I continue to remind everybody, the May 8th rain date is on May 15th because I did not want a further impact upon Mother's Day. Other
Larry,
than
I'm
that,
prepared.
that's the strategy.
Larry, I'm prepared to make the
Michael?
motion.
Yes, please.
Yeah, just clarification prior to doing that. Joe, the motion in the packet is pursuant to Mass General Laws 39, Section 39, Chapter 39, Section 9. That's not the postponement part of it. In the memo line, RE, vote to postpone 2021 annual town meeting to Saturday, May 8th. Which would you like the motion to reference? Postponing or just the motion that was provided by council?
So what I'd like to do is defer to council simply because I tried to do a copy and paste from Attorney Giorgio's memorandum on the question.
So John, do I make a motion to postpone first and then make a motion for the dates after the fact? Or do I just make the motion to town meeting on the 8th on the field with a rain date?
Yeah, you can just vote to set the date for the annual town meeting as May 8th, 2021, with a rain date of May 15th, 2021.
Okay, thank you.
That's all you need to do. That's pursuant to
Excuse me, Michael, let me get to Don.
Yeah, before there's a motion, John, you and I have discussed this before. I think you're still going to have to cite the state authority to do that because this is in our home rule charter. It's not just an up for grabs date.
Right. So I believe the motion I provided said pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 39, Section 9.
Yes.
I move to set the date for the annual town meeting.
That's what I wanted to clarify.
Yep.
Okay. With that, I move pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 39, Section 9, that the Board of Selectmen set the date for the 2021 annual town meeting as Saturday, May 8th, 2021 at 10 a.m. and further to establish a rain date if necessary on Saturday, May 15th, 2021 at 10 a.m. to be held at Stadium Field, 75 Oak Street, also known as Monomoy Regional High School.
Second.
The second?
Second.
Any other discussion? Don?
Yeah, I just want to point out, I mean, I've done tons of fundraisers through the years, through Hesh and other places that in May. This is probably going to require a higher power than us to pray for it because May is our monsoon season.
Thank you for that, Don. I will also just comment that this in no way affects our vote day, the day we vote. That day remains the same.
So
we have a motion and a second. John, did you wish to speak?
I just wanted to emphasize, thinking about this going forward, you cannot change the date of the annual election. It has to be as provided for in the charter. Last year was different. That doesn't apply this year.
Yeah. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Let's take a roll call. Don?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So we're okay with that, Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next item, after long delay, Attorney John Giorgio is here to discuss. This is a proposed warrant article. It gets to a permanent easement as it relates to Verizon Wireless. You'll see the general language offered by council for the warrant article. And I would just further add that the article was not placed in the draft yet, pending this discussion by the board. And I would respectfully turn it over to Attorney John Giorgio for a presentation to the board.
So my understanding is that this is a request from the utility company to acquire an easement for the installation of utility poles. We have drafted the warrant article. The easement has to be approved by town meeting, which will actually authorize the select board to grant the easement. So this is a fairly standard article. And it's would be pending approval of town meeting.
Mr. Chair, Michael?
Michael?
I respectfully ask that we indefinitely postpone this or bring it back next week. I asked last week for where this lot is, how much it's worth, is it buildable? None of that information is in the packet tonight. So when we get that information, we can make an educated decision on this. I'd be willing to vote on it. Until then, it seems irresponsible not to show the public where this lot is, what size it is it buildable, what's it worth, so on and so on. And all we have is the same information last week with the inclusion now of John Giorgio on the phone telling us what the motion should be. So to have this conversation tonight without that information in front of us is not fair to the public or the board.
Can we get that information?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, I would just add that we did reach out to Attorney Giorgio's colleagues at KP Law. I don't have access to any significant material other than what was provided this evening. It was my understanding that we'd be getting more material as it relates to the work of the attorneys at KP Law. So I certainly don't object to the objections raised, or I should say have a complaint with the objections raised. I don't have the information readily available at my disposal.
John, are you able to follow up on that?
Certainly, we can do that.
Mr. Chair, why would we need the attorney and attorney's fees associated with to look at what the lot is, how we acquired the lot, and the value of the lot? Couldn't we get that from our assessor?
I'll let Joe respond to that.
Sure. My response to that is just that it's my understanding that this has been a matter of negotiation and discussion for several years, the extent of which I'm not aware of and couldn't speak to. I certainly have no objection to getting the records that we have. What I'm trying to convey is I can't speak to this issue because I was not part to it. It precedes me.
Ed?
Yeah, I mean, the map of the parcel on most of these easements and the ownership history in the past years has always been provided by our town surveyor, which we no longer have. I'm imagining our town engineer could pull this information, or potentially our town planner.
Joe, can we move that back to you, and you can pull together some more information from town staff?
Certainly we'll try.
And bring it back. What's the urgency of this? If we can't do it next week, we can do it the week after. Is that correct?
Correct. It's my understanding that you can add this up until right before you close and sign the warrant.
Don?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to underscore what Michael said and be emphatic about this. While in past years we have gotten to the point where we felt that it was sufficient to be able to give the Board of Selectmen the authority to negotiate out a final conclusion to things, I'm adamantly against that kind of thing. The state law conveying, about us conveying land ownership rights or easements or whatever, I'm personally a really big proponent that, as a purist, when you read that if you're going to give up something, you need to let town meeting know what they're giving up to get what, and it's got to be explicit. I refuse to vote for something that grants us authority to do something the town meeting should hear itself. So to Michael's point, we should have this information available for the town meeting people to determine whether they do or don't want to grant that.
Okay, I think we'll follow up. Before we take the vote now, when I read this, I presumed that this should all be available for town meeting, but you're right, we should have that before we decide to put it on the warrant ourselves. Because it certainly wouldn't fly at town meeting without the information. Joe, we'll leave it back in your hands then, and to pull together the information so we're all comfortable.
Thank you.
I know so I don't want to put you on the spot because John,
I was going to suggest that I can have Sharon contact Verizon. They should be the ones providing us with the easement plan. But I haven't seen that. I don't know if it exists, but I assume they have something. So we can work with the utility company, Joe, to get us the information of exactly what they're looking for. I don't know if that already exists in town hall, but we can certainly pursue it for next week.
Okay, Ed?
I can say that we've searched and haven't found that material. That's why we asked. Thank you.
Larry, I guess my other question is that they want this easement to install fiber optic equipment, which presumably is what they would be installing on the Cape if they were bringing their FiOS system down to the Cape. And it's been my understanding that they're not doing that. And so my question is, if we're, the general public isn't going to be able to get the benefit of having additional layer of competitiveness for, cable and information services as opposed to simply having Comcast, then why are we considering this?
We'll bring it back.
Larry, if I may?
Michael?
Ed, thank you for that, because that's a thought that I didn't have. My thought is a very simple thought. The word permanent is permanent. And Harbor Road, if this is how we got this lot is very important to town meeting. Is this lot valuable? I would guess is very important to town meeting. Is it sellable? Is it usable? These are all questions that we should answer, as well as Ed's question, before we put this in the warrant and ask town meeting for a permanent easement. Permanent means permanent. Permanent to me means we're not going to be able to use the lot. They're taking the lot. So what benefit to the town of Harwich and what value, monetary or not monetary, they're very important questions. And we should not proceed on this until we have all of the answers.
I think we've agreed to bring this back when we can. Next on the Joe's discussion of we have one housing light.
I'm prepared to make a motion on that. I'm prepared to make a motion on this.
Okay.
I move that we approve the 2021 annual lodging license for, I don't even know, Sice Amp Inc. DBA, the Turn Inn, 91 Chase Street.
Second.
Second, discussion? I'll take a roll call. Ed?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Moving on to old business. Joe? And
Mr. Chairman, a very brief update, as you can see there under the ongoing discussion on comprehensive wastewater management plan. Mr. Chairman, as you know, we were able to resume the quarterly Chatham IMA advisory group meetings 1 year after our last meeting. However, it was a productive discussion today. I was joined by Chairman Ballantyne, but we also had the benefit of our wastewater superintendent as we discussed items related to the Chatham IMA. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to turn it over to our wastewater superintendent for a brief update.
Hello, Dan.
How you doing? Good evening. So just to touch upon some of the items we discussed, I guess I'll start with, I did ask some targeted questions to some of the things that the board has been inquiring about for some time. One of which being, will Chatham take flow from other parts of Harwich, or what will they take if we don't use the 300,000 gallons that we've purchased? So what they relayed at the meeting is that they would be willing to take flow from within the Pleasant Bay watershed and also within the Great Sand Lakes area, as those were already existing and written into the IMA. But any flow request beyond those areas, they would want to take back to the taxpayers, because there was some debate at the time when the IMA was developed as to where the flow is coming from. So that was what we got. Also, if we don't end up generating the 300,000 gallons of flow, what are the provisions there? So it was unanimous in that the buyback provisions that are in the IMA are in there and would be applicable to that situation as well. And we also discussed briefly the topic of contract operations and expanding upon Weston and Sampson's role in Chatham to oversee the collection system here in Harwich. So I guess with that, I would turn it back to any questions.
Questions for Dan?
I guess I'll start. Larry?
Yes, Michael.
Dan, in those meetings, were they open, or were they just reciting the contract that we have and the negotiations that we had before? Money, in my mind, money's money in the end. And if we buy back or don't use 200,000 gallons, which is what we're looking like, they're not open to accepting wastewater for a profit from another part of our town?
They are open, but they would want to. So the way that the IMA is set up is there's certain things that the intermunicipal group can do on its own, and there's things that they would want to, or that they would not feel comfortable doing on their own. So they're not saying they won't take it, but they're saying that if we did want them to take flow from a different part of town, that they would have to, they would not do that within the confines of the IMA working group. They would want to get approval from their taxpayers.
And the Board of Selectmen. That sounds great. Thank you, Dan.
Yep.
Other questions for Dan? Yeah, I think just to Michael, your question and Dan's point, it was a good discussion there. I feel good that they're willing to work with us on flows. They acknowledge that we're going through computer modeling of what our flows are to update our estimates, and will work with us on that. They'll work with us on timing, at least long term. There's, as Dan's indicated, there's some that we can do within the framework, and there's others that they apparently was a great deal of discussion going forward that they need to bring back to town meeting.
Larry, if I may?
Yes.
I don't want to miss an opportunity to let the taxpayers know too that our past engineer grossly overestimated the flow from East Harwich based on what we're currently doing out there. And you know, we can keep having these conversations, but until that engineer comes back to us and explains that they made a mistake, or that there's a potential of this 300,000 gallons when we're only going to hit 125, maybe 150, if we do contract 3, again, we failed our taxpayers.
To that, if I can, Larry, respond real quick to that.
Don? Yes, Dan, please.
So, and just Mike, to that same line of thought, we did also discuss today the milestone payments at the meeting, and where we're going to be initiating flow, and some of those milestone payments are looking like they may be stacking where they weren't really intended to. That was one of the other things, and we talked about coming back to them to discuss that further once we were able to do the sewer CAD model and get a better understanding of what the flows in East Harwich are, so that we can better lay out those payments.
Well, thank you, Dan, for that. And with that, I would express my gratitude to the town of Chatham for having those conversations with us, because this certainly wasn't their mistake.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I totally agree with Michael and Dan about this. However, I don't want to be cryptic about it because the public isn't going to be able to read this in code. I understand that the past engineer that was involved with this particular thing is still the engineer that we're using on other things, and it's CDM Smith. Is that correct, just for the record?
If that was to me,
yes. That's why somebody to confirm it so that the public gets that we're not talking in code here.
Yeah, so the 300,000 gallon flow that we purchased was based upon the CWMP and information provided through CDM Smith.
Thank you.
I probably should clarify that. However, those initial flows were calculated by the Mass Estuarine program, and then put into our CDM Smith by CDM Smith. They weren't, the flows weren't themselves calculated by CDM Smith.
But the executive summary was generated by CDM Smith, and that's what created the basis for the conversation for the estuaries conversation.
But most importantly, if I can, we have new attenuation rates in the report I just saw in my inbox the other day. I haven't had a chance to read it. And with the sewer CAD modeling and the work that the Pleasant Bay Alliance is doing with respect to calculating and quantifying nitrogen reduction in Pleasant Bay, I think that, you know, these are all good things and a step in the right direction.
But Mr. Chair, that wasn't based on new information from CDM Smith. That's all I'm trying to clarify.
Correct.
No, that's correct. we're updating the information. That's absolutely, that I agree with you 100%. Okay. Thank you, Joe. We'll go on. If there's nothing else, we'll go on to the next item of old business.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I believe Ms. Harper from the Art Center at the Harwich Junior Theater was on earlier, but what the board will see in your packet, and as you may recall from an earlier meeting, the Art Center made contact with the town that they're looking to have repairs made to their floor. And as I indicated at the time, we weren't able to locate the existing agreement between the parties. I do have that agreement that's in your packet, and I've highlighted under section 7, which is page 5, some relevant topics that relate to that. In anticipation of getting this on the agenda for this evening, we did reach out to Ms. Harper at the Junior Theater. We haven't been able to connect directly, but you'll see that within the requirements for repairs and maintenance by the lessor, the lessee in this case,
Yeah.
they have to
Joe?
provide plans to the, yep.
Go ahead, Joe. I have a statement that she's given me to read when it's appropriate.
Sure, just to finish that, the requirements of the contract are that they provide plans and specifications to the Board of Selectmen in advance of any of the work, and that the board has to determine that the work is appropriate and attractive.
So it's in our agreement, which is in our packet.
Correct.
Tammy was on earlier, as Joe said, and she didn't make it to the end, but she did give me, in case she couldn't make it, she gave me a statement that I promised I would read for her. The current floor of the Arts Center is in the front room of the bottom floor facing the parking lot, has reached the end of its life. It poses a risk for our students. In pre-pandemic times, we use this room for classes, auditions, and to hold rehearsals. We received a grant from a local foundation to cover the cost of replacing the floor, and we have been waiting for approval from the town to move forward with this project. We want to do it as soon as possible so we can start to resume programming there. We hope to have our youngest students in the Arts Center for classes this summer. So that was what she was going to comment on this. And I think, Julie, you're saying we're in compliance with our agreement.
Well, no, if I may, what I was suggesting is that before anything can take place, the board is supposed to receive their plans. So we had asked if they were going to submit their plans for the board. However, I do want to point out, not really knowing what they were talking about with regard to their floors, I do just want to draw the board's attention to page 28 of the agreement. And that is the maintenance and repair responsibilities for that building. I don't know if the highlight appeared in your materials, but if you look under the list under interior, you can see that the tenant bears all the responsibilities for the interior work, except when it gets to reinforcement of floors to meet building uses, and that's the responsibility of the town. And so that's why we were hoping to have a little bit of a more broader discussion to determine what is it was being requested, who's responsible for it, and then for the board to make any decisions after that.
Larry, if I may.
We need to bring this back then, once they give us the plan.
Larry, if I may.
Michael?
Yes. First and foremost, the Arts Center doesn't exist in the lease agreements, the Harwich Junior Theater. So we have to update when this comes back, we need to update the agenda item so that it reflects what the actual lease is. Second, reinforcement of floors. Joe, I read that. Reinforcement of floors and replacing flooring are two completely different things, and I would argue that, but couldn't argue it until they produce the plans. But flooring and reinforcing are two different things. Don, you may remember, I think you were on the board at this point, we had pretty deep discussions about the building, what we were doing with the building, the lease, and there were several holes in what the leasee said they were going to do and what they did and what the town said they were going to do and what they did, and not to prolong and redo history, because I think that might open up a can of worms for the town as well as the junior theater. I don't think either side has properly enforced its responsibility in the lease agreement. But on this, replacing flooring is not reinforcing flooring, and I don't believe that's a conversation we should even engage in. But I do agree with Joe that we need to see the plans. And I would ask that the Arts Center, if that's what they're now going by, we need to update the lease. And if their insurance refers to the Arts Center and not the junior theater, we certainly need to update the lease. But the topic on the agenda definitely needs to change based on the language of what I got tonight.
Ed?
Yeah. As to the structure of the flooring, I know I'm not sure how to describe it, but there's two main classrooms on the downstairs. Under one of the classrooms, a previous CPC article concerned it, and we wound up replacing the foundation under that wing of the building, placing a full basement, and placing new structure and support under the floor joisting in that area. So, I can't imagine that given that we knew the sort that was going to be used for an assembly type use, that we didn't bring it to code for that purpose at that time.
Okay. Thank you, Ed. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Listen, I love the junior theater. I've been involved with it since the early 90s. I've been in that room to audition. I've been in that room to see classrooms, to Ed's point, of people dancing. All that's well and good, but it also represents the one-room schoolhouse for the village that it's in. And to Michael's point, we really need to see a plan. I mean, there could be replacing flooring could be anything. It could be laminate flooring. We need to see a plan so that it's consistent with the nature of the building.
Joe, we'll bring this back then once you get a chance to follow up.
Will do.
Okay. That comes back. We're moving on next to the town administrator's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, to you and the members of the board. First, we received in the mail today, too late to put on the agenda, but it was shared with the selectmen and can certainly bring it back for the board's discussion. But Laurie Moore of the Harwich Historical Society has reached out, and the Historical Society is interested in conducting a fundraising walk that begins and ends at Brooks Academy Museum later in the spring. In fact, 2 weeks after our proposed town meeting date. So I can have staff work with them. And I believe the purview of walks and all of that have to be confirmed by the board and working with public safety. So we can get this vetted and get it in front of the board again to certainly see if we can partner with the Historical Society for their fundraising efforts. They also indicate in their letter that they're willing to offer their site as a small wedding venue in the future. So perhaps we can have more information on that. I do not intend this to steal the thunder of anybody, but I do want to say that I will be working with Selectman McManus, Town Engineer Griffin Ryder, Bob Young, and certainly property owners within Harwich Center as we begin the necessary work to spend the money that was earned in the Shared Streets Grant that Selectman McManus and Engineer Ryder were able to acquire earlier. I suspect that Selectman McManus may speak to this under Selectman's report. And then last, Mr. Chairman, but by no means least, I am thrilled to announce that I have hired a Director of Public Health. And to no one's surprise, this individual comes to us as an internal candidate. If you bear with me for a moment, I just want to go back to my notes. So many of us may know Katie Tenalia. She is now Katie O'Neill. As I mentioned to others before, she did two very big things, at least two very big things in 2020. And in no particular order, she got married and she completed her doctorate in public health. And so I am thrilled to name Dr. Katie O'Neill as our health director for the town of Harwich, following in the wonderful footsteps and in the shoes of her predecessor, our assistant town administrator. And for the second consecutive time, the senior health agent has earned a promotion to the position of health director. And I just want to put out there specifically that Katie, or Dr. O'Neill, as we know her, has her doctorate in public health to follow upon her master's degree in epidemiology. Certainly two very necessary degrees that we can rely upon. And we will wait the requisite 14 days. So her start date is scheduled for 2 weeks from tomorrow. However, I will take the initiative to now start looking for a senior health agent. But very excited to have Dr. O'Neill now as our health director. Not that anybody could replace our former health director. Megan, I know you're still on. But that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Well, that's great news. And Megan, you can get rid of the interim health director title then. I have one question, I guess for I don't know, Joe or Griffin probably, but we have a short time. What's the deadline on the Smart Cities program? That comes up pretty quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah, the funds have to be expended by May 31st, expended and or returned. So that's why I said we're working this week to develop outreach to all the stakeholders in and around the area so that we can get going. I know from updates from both Selectman McManus and Griffin Ryder that they and DPW have already been strategizing on immediate impacts that can be made, leveraging these funds for the benefit of the center.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Don, did you have a comment?
Yeah, this is not an employee appointment. It's a department head one, and under the charter, we'd have to confirm it. I'd be willing to do that tonight, but it wasn't agended. So if you can make sure it's on the next agenda, I'd be happy to make the motion myself.
Okay. We got that. Thank you, Joe. Selectmen's reports. Don, while you have your mic open, I'll go to you first.
Absolutely nothing.
Michael?
No, just to say that, well, I look forward to Ed's comments, but on Harwich Center, but just to re-congratulate, and I'll start with Bob Young, the gentleman that has the Seal Pub, and his efforts in helping us get this grant. So a big thank you to Bob Young, the business owner, that took it upon himself to really drive this initiative, and then to town staff and Selectman McManus for driving, getting it done. As we progress into actual builds, it would be nice to make, in my mind, and really not favoritism to the Seal Pub, but it would be nice to make some of the more visible changes to Harwich Center at the entrance from 124, which happens to dump out there. So as we look to do work in Harwich Center, I think that is the biggest statement to our visitors and people entering from exit 10 into Harwich Center. And again, I would thank the board for their patience with me in the last month. This has been a great winter of travel for me, but I haven't been as visible to you or the voters. My picture hasn't been up, and I've missed 2 meetings. So thank the voters, taxpayers, and thank the board for their patience.
Thank you, Michael. Ed?
Yeah, I've had a brief conversation with Griffin Ryder, and hope either tomorrow or Wednesday we'll start the process of getting the stakeholders along Main Street together to develop a sort of a working plan for expenditure of the money. What's been approved is much more of a conceptual plan, and it's the process of how they came up with a dollar figure to place on what was as conceptual as it is interesting. But the sorts of things we'll be doing, a lot of them will be done in a, I don't know how best way to characterize it, but in terms of sharing the use of the streets, some temporary sorts of structures that can be, if they don't work out, can be easily moved. Some things will be permanent, like if we do some, one of the interests is doing some improvements to the location and construction of the handicap curb cuts, which are in many cases lacking or substandard. Those will be done permanently, but other things will be done on more of a provisional or temporary nature. And it'll give us a chance to try out some different configurations and see what that impact is going to have on the pedestrian use of the center, the traffic flows and traffic calming aspects of the things that we do, and be able to see how those things work and then work those into a future more permanent plan that can be implemented down the road to make the center a much more of a place to be than sometimes as you stand there and the traffic and the trucks and everybody is just booming through. It's not as a desirable place to be, but I think we can make it the center of our community that we hope it can be.
Thank you, Ed. And I have nothing for tonight, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'm moved.
So moved.
Take a roll call. Michael?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Good evening, Joe.
Good night, folks.